So let's talk about Art Basel for a second. If you're not familiar with Art Basel, it's this event that happens every year. The crowds flock into Miami every December for this art week, basically. And all week there's pop-up shows, art galleries, there's the flagship Art Basel event at this convention center in Miami Beach. And it basically turns into like a week of people coming to see art. But what's funny is this is my third Art Basel now since living in Miami. And I've noticed a theme, which is that really 10% or less of the whole shebang is about art. And 90% at least is really about the who's who, the frou-frou, the socializing, the FOMO. People want to get into the parties, they want to be seen, they take selfies with each other, they take selfies with the art. And today was the last day of Art Basel, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I went today to the main event, which is again at the convention center here in Miami Beach, and it basically turns into a museum for a handful of days. Like, you just walk around and it's corridors and corridors of artists' work, contemporary work. And these are artists, of course, trying to make a living, trying to sell their art, trying to promote themselves. But again, I realized, who's really buying the art? 0.0001% of people here are maybe interested in buying art, but the rest of it is just consumerism 101. It's people getting drunk at these events. It's people wanting to be seen. Of course, there's a whole industry around it, right? So there's liquor brands that take advantage to promote themselves and promote their products. And then there's random Lamborghini adjacent promo deals. And there's a lot of stuff going on, sponsorships, right? But anyway, today I was walking around and I just got annoyed, by how many people there were, just swarms of people. And some of them taking selfies with the art. It's one thing to take a picture of the art because you're a fan of it. Maybe you want to look up the artist later, but people taking photos, just imagine. It's people doing this, I'm what is this? Are you here for the art, or are you here to prove to people on Instagram that you came here, But then I had this epiphany. I'm walking around and a lot of the art, I was this is kind of shit. A lot of this art, you couldn't pay me to put this in my home. Now, maybe I'm just ignorant. Maybe I just don't understand the luxury of a lot of this art, contemporary art. And truthfully, I have limited knowledge about art. I took one course in college about art history, and I learned things that I otherwise just wouldn't know, how you can notice just the detail that an artist uses, lighting in a painting, is a really difficult thing to accomplish, right? For somebody to basically mimic real life through painting to the point where they really capture, the angle of sunlight around sunset or something like that, right? Art history teaches you stuff like this, and you realize how incredible certain artists are. But as I'm sure some of you relate to just from going to museums, right? A lot of it, you're this doesn't inspire me, this doesn't move me. And a lot of people will be I could do this too. And I feel that's missing the point, for me at least. For me, art, anybody can do this, right? I painted this. Anybody can do this, but to me, that's not the point. The point is, how does it make you feel? Do you like it? Do you feel it complements your home as somebody who wants to have art, if you want to have art in your home? But a lot of the art I saw, I was why? It's not aesthetically pleasing. I don't know that many people would want this in their home. And you start to realize a lot of it is really about ego. And I had this huge epiphany as I was walking around Art Basel, and I realized that it mimics social media in a lot of ways, meaning you always hear this criticism of social media, and the younger generations in particular, right? Millennials and Gen Z, there's so much criticism of this is such a narcissistic generation. They put everything out there. They want everybody to know everything that's going on in their lives via Instagram, via Snapchat, via YouTube, right? But I realized just seeing all this art and how little of it to me felt sellable, marketable, buyable. Again, coming from an amateur perspective of just seeing just the sheer volume of art and how few people must genuinely be there to buy a $50,000 painting, right? It made me realize this mimics social media. This mimics the entertainment industry. How many people are singers, writers, actors? But in the end, very few really make it through because there's very few people who are worth even paying attention to. And in that moment, I realized this narcissism, criticism that you hear about social media today, I guess it's always been there. It's just this is the new version. And art, presumably, a lot of these people are not going to make money from this art. A lot of people just put something out there and they must stand by it. They must think it's great, but like nobody would even notice their artwork otherwise. And it made me realize just how many people just create stuff for the sake of creating stuff. And maybe it feels good for them, right? Maybe it's therapeutic. It's a release for them. But most of this volume is just shit. And social media is the same way, right? Everybody's posting on Instagram what they ate for breakfast, or this new dress they bought, or it's the 100th person taking a selfie at, I don't know, Times Square, the Eiffel Tower, Taj Mahal, the Great Wall of China, right? It's like you're not adding anything new to the conversation, right? But you realize it's almost like we have this need as humans to just participate and do as the others are doing in that niche community or whatever. But most of it is not noteworthy. But then you have these select few pieces that move you. And if they move you, they probably move other people too. Here's some paintings that I actually did like, that I did notice. And a few of them in particular I really, really liked. And I thought, you know what? If I had $20K to spend on one painting because I just had it like that financially and I had a wall that I needed to cover in a home, I think I would buy this. There was one piece in particular that I really liked, really, really liked. Now, I inquired about pricing. That's how much I liked it. And it was like $3,000. One day I want to buy this guy's art. I guess that's the point maybe of these events, that maybe you'll find one artist that you otherwise would never find out about. And then you realize they have all these pieces and maybe one or a few are in your budget and you can afford it. If I had the means to spend $20K on just a single piece of art, like I would buy some of these. But it was such a small minority of the pieces that I saw that it just really made me reflect on this idea of like how many people are just producing stuff that doesn't actually have value for the world necessarily. But I guess that's the whole point, right? I guess if you are an art buyer, most things are not going to catch your eye, right? Or an art collector, or somebody maybe on behalf of a client coming through to find these pieces. But honestly, you guys, like some of it was so to me, just seems so awful as art that I quite frankly, I prefer my art. Like here I am in my bathroom with some of my art. This is so basic, right? But to me, this is so much more aesthetically pleasing than, I kid you not, 90% plus of the stuff that I saw at Art Basel. So it's just interesting to reflect on all these things, right? And the other epiphany for me, I guess, is like, I potentially have more talent in me than some of these artists being presented at the annual Art Basel event. And you realize how much of this is just show. It's just presentation of ego, and somebody told you that this is respectable art. So you're supposed to view it that way. But really, it's what we've been taught. We've been taught to value this kind of art because here it is on display at this big art event, right? And by the way, these art events are not cheap. It's like typically about $50 an entrance, just to kind of like a museum, but I feel like for a museum, even $50 is kind of pricey. But just imagine you're paying $50 at least, right? If you get food or drinks there, then that's another $20, $50, right? And it just made me think about how so much of art, inspiration, creativity, and really just symbolism in life, right? It's people telling you what this symbol means and what this represents and that you're supposed to like it or it's supposed to be important. But here I am in my apartment valuing my homemade pieces more than that. So it just made me realize how narcissistic our society actually is. that so many people are creating some of these pieces and calling it art and selling it for like thousands. And I'm not talking 1,000, 2,000. I'm talking like 10 G's, 20 G's, 50 G's. Okay. But also it made me realize how all of us are completely capable to be a featured artist, right? A featured actor, a featured politician, whatever it is, right? A lot of it is just the narrative that you've been taught, and like, do you actually believe in what you're doing? But to be honest, like, as the amateur artist that I am, I caught myself thinking, if I just made these pieces wall size, I don't know, 10 feet by 10 feet, like, I would be more likely to buy that as a stranger than the stuff that I saw there. Overall, the event to me is kind of like whimsical and ridiculous, that there's this many pieces that are not even that alluring. And you're like, well, what is really the point of this then? What is the point of this? Is this to feed people's ego, these artists? Is it to teach society that they should buy art and that keeps that industry going? So is it just to feed the ego of the artist community and the artist industry? Or is it just another event like so many other events where, yeah, it's about art or it's about food or it's about music on the surface, but really it's a business and companies are coming in to cash out on society's disposable income. So it just made me think about all these things, but particularly the biggest takeaway for me was this idea of like, nobody calls this narcissism. Nobody calls this like, look at how superficial the older generation is with their paintings that aren't really saying much. But people are very quick to criticize my generation and Gen Z about their use of social media. For me, this is the same thing. Just because you threw some stuff on a canvas doesn't suddenly mean that it's worthy of being at this event where people have to pay $50 to get in and they can't even afford your piece. 99% of people there, right? More than 99% can't afford your $50,000 painting that frankly looks like it costs $10 worth of Crayola crayons and a canvas from Amazon. Anyway, I've said enough. This video is long enough. Curious as always what you guys think.